Hey team, you're about to experience my interview with Dennis Mistriotti from Batch. Dennis is the co-founder and CEO of Batch, and Batch is a manufacturer, wholesaler, distributor, and D2C merchant of hemp and CBD products. They operate in a highly regulated industry, and Dennis's experience of building a business in this industry are going to be super helpful for you. His lessons on life, on business, and building businesses with friends are super inspirational. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am super excited to welcome Dennis Mistriotti to the podcast. Welcome, Dennis.
Thank you, Jason. Excited to be here.
It's so good to have you along for the ride today. You had somebody, I think it was a podcast booking agent or something like that reached out to me on your behalf to say, hey, look, we'd love to get Dennis on the pod to talk about weed. No, just kidding. Not weed, but no, he explained that you had a really eclectic background and you're now doing some pretty amazing things in the e-com space, and you work in a highly regulated part of the industry. And I feel like this is something that more and more e-commerce merchants are having to face as they look at moving into, I've worked for a long time. I worked as e-commerce manager for a heavily regulated industry as well. I was working for a brand that worked in the supplement space, and that's super heavily regulated. And so anytime you're working in any kind of, whether it be alcohol, whether it be cannabis, whether it be supplements, vitamins, it doesn't really matter. When you're working in a regulated industry, it presents a whole set of unique challenges that not many people have to deal with. But before we get into what you're doing over at Batch, why don't you give us a little bit of the insight on your background and how you came to even be in this space to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin right now. This is where our company's headquarters is. And I started this business 5 years ago, a little more than 5 years ago, with my two college roommates at the time from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So born and raised in Wisconsin, roomed with my best friends there. And as far as my entrepreneurial story goes, we were just in college, had those typical conversations amongst each other. Hey, man, we should start a business. I think there's something we could do, just dreaming big while not doing much. And we actually did pursue something that we thought at the time to be attainable, and that was actually a food truck. And so while we were going to school, like literally sophomores in college, we started a Greek food truck on campus. My family is Greek, so the cuisine we had down. I grew up with my grandfather having a restaurant per typical Greek fashion. And so I knew that side of the industry, and having no money, that was something that we could pursue realistically. Even still, what we didn't know, Madison has a very vibrant food cart scene, by the way. Really cool food carts right in the middle of campus. We assumed, we'll just get a food cart and we'll just be right in the middle of everything, printing money and all this stuff. And to sprint through the story, we found out that you had to enter a competition and you had to be judged on your appearance and originality and all this stuff. Long story short, we found all that out after we had purchased the food cart, but succeeded nonetheless and landed in like the top 10 among 100 food carts, and basically spent 2 years of college together operating this thing while going to class. I was in business school. My two other co-founders were chemical engineers. And so learned a lot about the grit of entrepreneurship, even though that has nothing to do necessarily industry-wise to what I'm doing now. And so when we graduated, we knew that we wanted to run a business again, but wanted to do something that we felt had purpose and something that we were passionate about. And while there's certainly a potential path in street food, we wanted to just holster that until we fully explored what we were maybe capable of. And in 2018, industrial hemp became legal nationwide, or it was due to be legal. And I kind of had my eye on it because I had a relative in Colorado actually that was telling me how a lot of marijuana farms were converting to hemp before 2018. And I was just probing because at the time I had no idea why or what that even meant. Learned about CBD, learned about this non-recreational side to the cannabis industry. And then when it legalized, I talked to my guys. I'm like, yo, we should look into this. This is really fascinating. We all are passionate about natural remedies, alternative medicine. And it was a fascinating industry, both from a business perspective, a scientific perspective, and an agricultural perspective, which we knew the least about. But it really fit our skill set well and our interest. And that's where it all started. We pursued all sorts of talks and conferences and learned everything from the ground up. And especially being in Wisconsin, once we did that, we were like the epicenter of cannabis knowledge in a state which I don't know if has none of it prior to the hemp legalization.
And what Wisconsin is typically known for is cheese, and for people from there being known as cheeseheads. And so it's interesting that you decided to go into something that is pretty much the antithesis of what you would expect from an agricultural perspective or from a food perspective in Wisconsin. You pretty much did something that was the polar opposite of that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Beer, cheese, and brats is basically what it is. Natural plant medicine isn't necessarily in that same category. But what's funny is that one of the things that we discovered after the fact, kind of like the food cart, is that pre-prohibition, I'll call it, Wisconsin was actually the nation's leading producer of industrial hemp. And there's obviously a lot of farmland here. The hemp that was grown in the day was used for textiles and fiber, which is not at all like the plants that we're growing now, but technically it was the nation's producer. So had that in our back pocket, I guess.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty amazing origin story. And, that origin story definitely comes through very heavily in your website, your branding. You're very transparent. I think that especially when I work with brands that maybe don't have either as strong of an origin story as you guys do, or I guess haven't necessarily been able to figure out a way to communicate that effectively with the market, or make it a core part of their branding, or make it a core part of their messaging. And I really would like to dig into that a little bit more before we get into batch. And there's lots of things I'd like to double click on here. It seems like you guys have been able to weave your origin story into just about everything that you do. Meaning that a lot of websites today, a lot of D2C websites, a lot of wholesale websites, they completely remove the human element. They cleanse the human element from their website, from their branding, from their communications. It's basically nameless and faceless. And I would say I spend a lot of time on Reddit and LinkedIn trying to help people and trying to give them advice. And a whole lot of the posts, especially on Reddit, are from beginners, and they're from startups in the e-com space. And they say, I've just set up this new website. I've spent the last 2 months driving traffic there through Facebook and Google, and I've spent $5,000, $10,000, whatever, and I've gotten 0 sales out of it. Go and roast my website. And I would say a good 90+% of the time, those sites, when you go there, they engender zero trust. They're nameless, they're faceless, they're nondescript, they look like dropshipping websites. They might have 5 SKUs at best. And you look at that and you go, why would anybody in their right mind buy off of a website like this? There is zero story, there's nothing compelling, there's nothing unique. And oftentimes, they won't even tell you how long it's going to take to receive your items. That's how bad these websites are, because they take a $50 Shopify template, they get up and running in a day, they load up a few products that they got from AliExpress or that they're going to get from AliExpress and drop shipping, and then that's where they finish, and they expect to be drop ship millionaires. Whereas you guys, I think, because I went and checked out your website and I read your origin story and I saw some of the photos, you hanging out with your mates in a field of hemp. This, I think, it seems to be the brands that I see doing super well, particularly as D2C brands, their origin story is part and parcel of who they are. You cannot separate the origin story and the people behind it from the brand. They are one and the same. And so do you feel that has played a significant part in your success?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit it right on the head. Again, it's one of those things that almost happened accidentally, but especially as an e-commerce brand, different from an Amazon brand, if you don't have that story or a reason to fall in love with the brand or feel an emotional connection, then what is your real differentiator, at least in the space that I'm in for the most part. And also for our industry, that being hemp, cannabis, even you could say supplements to a degree. It's an industry that is so mystical still to so many. And to put a face to the brand and to show you, we make a point of showing everything that we do so the customer can feel comfortable. This is the hemp farm. Once we grow this hemp, this is how we turn it into the oil, and this is how we turn it into products, and then we ship it directly to your door. And the plan when we launched this brand was not, we're going to have this vertical supply chain. Now that we have it, we realize that it's so amazing, and we truly are doing things in a very transparent and authentic way. There really is no BS in the operation of making our products, and it's almost a challenge right now to show it as true as it really is, because we really are doing these things and trying to find the right ways to show our customers what we're doing is challenging, because we know what we're doing, and sometimes we think that we're showing everything off, but then when you really look on our website, and I'm like, if I was a new customer scrolling through this, I don't know if I'd fully understand what we're doing. But given that we're in it for the long haul, we're not just like flipping this business, it really helps to build on itself. And if you're going to spend money on customer acquisition, paid media spend, affiliate, etc., and you get them all the way to your site, and you get them to make that first purchase, and then they have the product in their hand. I see so many brands and other brands that I'm very close with too, that maybe get too caught up in the spreadsheet or a conversion rate, etc., and lose track of the fact that you've done all the hardest parts of acquiring a customer, and now you have the luxury of trying to keep them, making them fall in love with you. And to the description that you gave earlier of this cleansing of all human interaction, seeming like a dropship site, you're losing that opportunity to grow a community of sorts and have that person really understand you and what you guys are doing and feel a connection that's beyond transactional. So yeah, I really think that's what's differentiated us. And what's funny, a little bit of background as well on that is when we started, we actually started as a testing lab, and then got into agriculture, and then got into cannabis extraction, and then product formulation, and then launched our own brand, all of which just to make money for the following day, basically. But now when we're here and we look all the way back down the supply chain, we're like, oh, damn, we do the entire thing now. So it's been super unique and definitely a differentiator for us.
And what I'd like to get into and dig in a little bit deeper on is the wholesale side of the business. And we've got our B2B Commerce Corner, which is what this episode will fit into, because I think there's a lot of cannabis brands out there that are D2C. This is a big thing in the United States now, particularly in places of concentration where hemp is grown in large quantities, the Washington states of the United States, the Oregons of the United States. When we think of the major states that are major producers of hemp-based products, CBD-based products, etc. There are a few states that have taken the lead on that. California to a degree, probably a little bit less because there's still probably a little bit more regulation there than there are in some other states. But when we think about what has happened over the last, say, 5 to 10 years in the industry, there are certain states that have definitely taken the lead on this. And until I found out about you guys, I didn't realize Wisconsin was one of those. But very cool to hear that Wisconsin is being pretty liberal about this and seems to be supporting businesses in this space. But I think that what is overlooked in a lot of these discussions is the wholesale market. And the reality is that a lot of the brands that I see out there that are making CBD-based formulations, whether it's a skin cream, whether it's an edible, it doesn't really matter what the product, the ultimate end product is. 99% of the time, they are not actually growing the hemp themselves. They are buying the supply of the product, whether it be the raw material or a finished good. They're buying it off of a company like yours. They're not out there actually growing the product and monitoring it for effectiveness and CBD concentration, and they don't have the labs. They don't have all the equipment required to create consistency in their end product. And they rely on companies like you to do that. And so maybe you can speak a little bit about maybe the split between D2C revs versus B2B revs, whether B2B came first, whether D2C came first. Maybe talk through a little bit of your channel mix and how you arrived at that ideal channel mix for you as a business to create sustainability for you as a business?
Great question. To answer that, the easy one, B2B came first and then D2C came second for us. We didn't know, honestly, anything about D2C. We were just in the industry and we were observing D2C brands, especially during the real boom of CBD, like 2019, just exploding. And I became acquainted with some of them. We started actually manufacturing for some of them because, like I said, we have that full operation. We are a contract manufacturer for some 50 plus CBD companies. Especially at the time, a lot of those companies were a lot larger than us, and they were larger than us because of their D2C channels. We were very boots on the ground in our wholesale distribution, working directly with every single retailer. And that was really good at a time, like I said, especially in a time where CBD was the hottest thing in the world. There was a CBD sign on every corner of the universe, and any place that was carrying your products was an extra bump in revenue. As that lust wore off a little bit, we felt like the success of the business was partially out of our control in the sense that it depended on all these stores selling our products. And that became a little bit uneasy as sales declined per store. This is also back when we weren't very big. And so we started getting into D2C. Really over these last couple of years became experts in search engine optimization and affiliate by necessity, because we couldn't really do traditional paid advertising with Google and Facebook. So now I would say D2C from the brand side, from just batch alone, is over 90% of our revenue compared to wholesale. However, that manufacturing side that I talked about, where we are contract manufacturers for other brands, that does probably 33%, maybe a little bit more, of our entire revenue as a business. Obviously, there's a difference in margins there. We make 10 times as many units on the manufacturing side as we do for batch. You can imagine the margins and stuff like that is why batch is generating more revenue. And the key to that is just finding partners that have a way of distributing their products, whether that be online or in stores. And we have a lot of successful clients that have health and wellness chains that can distribute pretty well. But for us, it's been like a grassroots route to wholesale distribution, and we're actually trying to expand on that a little bit, but we are trying to do it in a calculated way by partnering with somebody that has the connections to do it in a scalable way. Because what we're not really trying to do right now is just keep picking up the phone and just go inch by inch. We'd like to partner with somebody that can really get us out there in the spots that are a right fit for our brand, that will be in front of a customer that is a proper fit for batch.
And okay, so that's great. 33% roughly of production is going to wholesale, only 10% of revenues because of the fact that D2C has such better margins. And so you're doing the bulk of your revenue, bulk of your profitability, let's say at least, is coming through D2C because, of course, you're capturing the retail and the wholesale margin on products that you manufacture. So being so heavily vertically integrated, that's a massive win for you guys. If you weren't as vertically integrated as you are, then you wouldn't retain as much margin as you do. So I guess the fact that you can go from concept to production to distribution and capture every margin, every small piece of margin at every step along the way means that your retained net margin becomes much, much better in the D2C world, which is amazing. But as you say, the B2B side of the business helps with NPD. It helps with distribution at scale. It helps, obviously, volumes. You're doing big volumes on the B2B side, even if the margins aren't as good. So really, I guess it all plays together in terms of channel mix to say, look, we may not be doing massive amounts of revenue or profitability on the B2B side, but certainly it helps with economies of scale so that we can have a viable D2C business.
Yeah, and one thing that's actually really unique, I don't want to get confused on what I'm considering wholesale and private label. So wholesale, I'm referring to as wholesaling our brand to a retailer versus the private label side where we are making somebody else's product and they are buying their own product, so to speak, from us. Both of which have intangible upside, though. For example, on that private label side, even though if you were to look at this business on paper from a business advisor's perspective, having a manufacturing service business under the same roof as your e-commerce brand doesn't necessarily add up as you would think it would. With that said, though, every time we get a new client on the private label side, we have the opportunity to learn from them on the e-commerce side, learn tips and tricks that they're doing, collaborate, sometimes even share with marketing spend, and learn about new products, learn about which flavors and formulations are selling best for them. And then on the e-commerce side, I can make connections that may need a manufacturing partner. And so the business actually funnels into itself a little bit, but the same could be said for wholesale. So even though that's not our main focus, when we partner with wholesalers, there's a lot of value that you gain just from knowledge alone that may not, again, show up on the spreadsheet right away, but to learn from those retailers that you partner with about other products and what they are finding successful, and to really collaborate with them and learn from them about what they need and want to be successful will be able to help you mold your business, I think, to be as productive and efficient as it can be. If they're seeing a product or a way about the way they present themselves that is successful, and you can learn from that, and that may be from a different brand, and you can learn from that and apply it to yourself, I think that's a huge win and one of the hidden benefits of partnering with wholesale channels.
And I think you make a really good point here that I think a lot of B2B businesses can learn from, right? You've got two routes to wholesale effectively. You've got contract manufacturing, which is a wholesale side of the business. You're effectively a manufacturer of products on behalf of other brands that want a very specific product formulation, brand, labeling, packaging, all that sort of stuff. It's completely unique to them. It's got nothing to do with batch. It doesn't say batch anywhere on the product. Then you've got batch products, which are your brand, they're your formulation, they're your packaging, they're everything that you sell on a wholesale distribution basis that then other retailers sell on your behalf, whether that be in physical stores, whether that be through their online stores, both. It might be through a local dispensary, whatever it might be. And you are just one of the brands that they dispense through their dispensaries, right? So you've got two wholesale channels and one D2C channel, if we think of it that way. Now, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, you only sell D2C through your own website. You do not sell D2C through your own physical retail batch stores. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, we do not have batch branded stores. So
right. Is that something that you guys have looked at and have considered and said, no, just with the cost structures that we have in place, it's more sustainable for us to own just a direct-to-consumer website? When we look at, and the reason I ask this question specifically is because we look at some of the D2C darlings of the D2C world that have only been D2C. They are not contract manufacturers. They do not wholesale their product. They are only D2C. And we look at famous brands like Allbirds or 8 Sleep or Casper or some of the other darlings that have received hundreds of millions of dollars of VC investment, particularly leading into the COVID boom. And many of these have never made money. They have never been profitable. They have incinerated cash at a great rate of knots. They are not vertically integrated in many cases. They are having their products contract manufactured by somebody else, and then they are effectively distributing their own product through their own D2C websites. And in the case of Allbirds, we have seen them try lots of things, and every single one of them fail. They've tried range extension into other products that encroach into the areas of activewear and compete with brands like Lululemon and Gymshark. I don't know what they were thinking. They've tried to establish physical retail stores, flagship stores, where they can sell their products. And those have failed. In fact, they've had to shutter most of those physical retail stores because the cost base was far too high for a direct-to-consumer brand to remain profitable in that physical retail space. But what they have resisted, and resisted heavily, and still don't do, which I can't believe that their investors haven't forced them to do, is to become a wholesale business, which means that you can't go and buy Allbirds through Macy's. You can't go and buy Allbirds through the Athlete's Foot. You can't go and buy Allbirds anywhere but Allbirds. And I think that in this day and age, having a differentiated channel mix where your distribution is broad and deep is the only way that these direct-to-consumer brands are actually ultimately going to survive, because there is no way, and I'd love you to speak specifically to this, because I think your business model addresses this uniquely, and a lot of brands don't understand why it's important to do things the way you're doing them, which is that no matter how much money you spend on performance marketing, and in your industry, you're even further limited because of regulations. And there's serious limits on what you can do from an organic and definitely from a performance marketing perspective. So you're even further hemmed in. But for these brands that aren't suffering from those challenges, what they still suffer from is the fact that no matter how much money they spend on SEO, SEM, performance marketing, affiliates, they will never directly be able to be in front of their entire market. It is simply not possible. No matter how much money they spend, there are certain customers that will buy off of certain retailers or suppliers. That means that those customers will never ever see an Allbirds ad. They will never ever be in an Allbirds store. They will never ever visit the Allbirds website. And as a result of that, until Allbirds, or unless Allbirds starts to distribute as a wholesaler to other retailers, they are going to be fighting with one hand tied behind their back. So maybe you can speak to this a little bit, and your thinking behind this, and your lack of, I just see it as a lack of arrogance. I see it as a mark of humility that you're willing to contract manufacture, that you're willing to wholesale, and you want to retail direct to consumer. That to me smacks of immense humility to say, look, no matter how good we are at what we do, we'll never be able to be in front of every single customer everywhere all the time.
Absolutely. And I think Allbirds is such a great example of that. At a point, you're just missing out on your full market potential. And I think we are in that space a little bit more than ever right now. In that the sense, like I mentioned, we're trying to increase our wholesale distribution channel. And for a while, there was a lot of opportunity in SEO and affiliate in this space. And while there was still green grass ahead, I was laser focused on that because it was working, and I saw where it was going to continue to work. And my sole mission was to eat up every opportunity that I could in that channel, which I do not regret for 1 second. I am now at a point where I'm starting to see the ceiling on that channel, which is fine. I'm glad that we got to the ceiling at least, right? And so now that we're there, we have to realize that if we put all our eggs in this basket, there's no left for it to go. So we step back and we look at what are these other channels. There are now opportunities for us to do paid media spend, which is great. They're still a little bit hindered, but that's an opportunity. But in terms of looking for a new way to scale the business, there is a set of customers that are going to buy in store. And also, to answer your question on why we don't have our own storefronts, we need to still focus to a degree on what we are good at. And we are not store operators. We're just not. I'm sure we could figure it out to some degree, but it's better for us to focus on what we are good at and let somebody else who knows how to operate a store sell our products on behalf of us. And so what's worked for us so far, and we have a lot of really good retail partners, is, especially in our industry, somebody that can speak to the product in an educated way, knows our brand well, knows us maybe personally, and can really educate the customer and make them feel comfortable making a purchase with our company in a way that mimics the experience that you mentioned earlier on our website, where they can feel connected to our brand. I'm sure that may be a different strategy from somebody that just distributes to a Target or a gas station. I don't know how well our brand with our price point and our positioning would perform in something like that, but that doesn't mean that it won't perform well in a wholesale distribution channel. And so I'm all for it. And I think similar to what I spoke about with private label manufacturing, all funneling together in a synergistic way, I feel the same way about wholesale. Somebody goes to not that we're in GNC, but a GNC type health store. They buy batch, they look at our package, they really like the product, they go to the website. Now they get to see everything about our brand, hopefully fall in love with it more, maybe reach out to customer service about something, maybe try a different product, become part of the newsletter. And I think it's still a way to just grow the community as a whole. But I think e-commerce marketers sometimes can feel deterred by not having the direct click data on everything that happens in a wholesale channel. And I think you have to have a little bit of faith that it's really contributing to the entire machine. And so I think we've seen that so far, and trying to actually learn on ways to do that even better.
And I notice also that you have, so you're running your D2C brand on Shopify from an e-commerce perspective, and that's welcome to 2 million other plus store community on Shopify. You're not alone in running your D2C brand on Shopify. That's a very common approach. And look, Shopify is a great platform for that and has a great community of apps, over 8,000 apps in the App Store. It's got a great developer community behind it. For D2C and B2C brands, it's one of the best platforms in the world today. And so I think you've done a great job with that. But I also noticed when I looked at your wholesale section, you're running the WD app for the wholesale side of the business. And so I'd like to unpick that a little bit in terms of you don't have a separate storefront for wholesale. You're not running on a separate platform because Shopify has its own challenges around wholesale. I think most people in the industry who've been at this for a long time, like I have, would tell you if somebody came to you and said, look, I want to put my B2B business onto a new e-commerce platform, we wouldn't recommend Shopify for that in 95+% of cases.
Exactly. Just
because it is not a great wholesale platform out of the box. Although there are some fantastic apps out there, Wholesale Gorilla, Sparklayer, WDD. I think if you log into the App Store today, there's about 30 different wholesale apps on the Shopify App Store to help you run your wholesale business on the core Shopify platform. Now, I'd love to know, first of all, do you run all of your wholesale business through that app on Shopify, or do you do EDI? Do you do field sales? Do you use a punch-out platform that's independent of Shopify? When we think about all your wholesale business that you do today, how much of that comes through your Shopify wholesale app versus other ways of them getting orders to you?
Good question. And man, the Shopify integration with wholesale is probably going to be a continuous improvement as improved technology comes out. The current platform and software that's fortifying everything could be changed or improved a month from now, for all I know. But so far, we're hanging tough with it. Most of our wholesale transactions take place through that Shopify store. And the reason in our case that is true is because, as I mentioned, we are pretty strong in search engine optimization. So a lot of people are actually finding us, even for wholesale CBD purchases, just through Google. And so there's a large percentage of customers that arrive at our site and they just want to place an order. They know what they want. They're convinced, whatever. Go on here, place the order. You don't need to get a PowerPoint deck or something on why you need to carry our products. You're here searching for it. You arrived on us. Go ahead and just do that. Also, from just like a customer maintenance perspective, it's nice to have the option for a customer to just go buy what they want and have that as automated as possible, because another thing that had deterred us in the past from wholesale as we were trying to scale was it seemed like every single new wholesale customer that we acquired had its own unique set of questions, and they could have placed one order for $200 or something. And then we're sitting there asking ourselves, like, oh, do we have any like window displays that we've never asked about window displays before? Like all these other particular things that came with wholesale. And so to automate as much as we could was super helpful from a customer service perspective. And I think it actually is much easier on the customer as well. They can still reach out to us if they need anything in particular, but hopefully that handles most of what they are looking for. If a customer is not ordering that way, I would say that means they are either they have a unique relationship with us, or they are a larger wholesaler that we interact with more intimately, where they will place an order with a purchase order and we will fulfill it, and we will do things just outside of the automated system to make sure nothing gets missed and they are catered to a little bit more carefully. But so really what that boils down to is a manual customer relationship versus an automated transaction, and you just split that up as responsibly as you can. And so far, it's actually worked pretty well for us.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. Now, if we think about the rest of your stack, your technology stack, what does that look like? Because when you're running a complex omni-channel business like you guys are, you've got manufacturing, you've got wholesale, you've got retail and direct to consumer. And obviously, you've got to have also, as you mentioned, all of the additional point of sale materials. You've got the marketing materials. You've got all that stuff for the wholesale side of the business as well. So you've got a lot of irons in the fire, quite separate from the lab, the growing, the vertical integration. All that stuff has got its own set of challenges with it. But so when we think, what ERP, do you run a PIM system? Do you run a CDP platform? What are some of the other components in your stack Do you run a WMS, warehouse management system? Do you use a 3PL for the shipping? What does the rest of the business stack look like for you guys today? And has that evolved a lot over the years, or is that something you're looking to enhance and extend moving forward?
Good question. Man, there's so many that we're using at all times. But I think from the wholesale and operations side, the best thing that I could say, so we're GMP certified from a manufacturing perspective, good manufacturing practices, even though we're in an industry that is not classified by the FDA. So technically we are not a supplement, we're not a food, we're not a drug, we just are CBD. But we are operating under the assumption that we're a dietary supplement. And to be GMP certified requires extensive material tracking, batch tracking, inventory management, everything.
Audit trail, end to end.
Country of origin of every single ingredient that we have in our entire facility and piece of packaging and all of that. So we use a software called Data Ninja, which manages all of that for us. And not only does that keep us compliant from a good manufacturing practices perspective, but also just from a efficiency and organizational perspective, it's really been a game changer. It was a massive undertaking and learning curve when we implemented it. We probably have 15 plus total employees here. As we were scaling, everybody was used to doing things a certain way, a little bit ragtag at times, a little bit, when do we order more bottles when the bottles start looking like they're low on the shelf, right? Nothing like that anymore. And so in order to be that bulletproof on the operations side, everything has to be tagged and tracked and received and shipped and monitored, scanned all across the board. And for a while, it was like not good vibes in here. But now that we have done it, it has really been a savior for us. And at any given time, I can know how much inventory we have of every single product and ingredient on hand. And again, that's called Data Ninja. And for the business that we have, that has been super useful. It helps with the e-commerce side a little bit as well for batch. From a wholesale perspective, in terms of us selling our brand to other retailers, there's nothing too revolutionary that I really have to share. It's like the e-commerce stack and then Data Ninja and ShipStation that we fulfill our own orders actually in-house as well because we have the space for it. Again, not something that most e-commerce brands do, but while we have the capability, it's actually also been a little bit of a weapon of ours. It allows us to obviously save money, customize the shipping experience. You can put gift cards in. You can put, if you want to do a free giveaway, you can just do that in the snap of a finger, which has been super nice. And it also allows us, when you see those returns come in, and you have a more intimate understanding of what the shipping experience is like for your end customer. So ShipStation is what powers that for us, and that's also been fantastic.
And Data Ninja, as far as I'm aware, and I've never worked with it before, but as I understand, it's a manufacturing and IMS and WMS platform. So it's a manufacturing workflow, tracking, inventory management, warehouse management platform. But it is not, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, an ERP. So it doesn't
Correct.
do the financials. And so typically when you run a system like Data Ninja, you will also need an ERP of some variety, or at least a financial system, whether that's QuickBooks, Xero, NetSuite. You need something else sitting underneath that where basically all of the inventory that comes out of a system like Data Ninja ends up in a platform like a NetSuite that then tracks all of your financials, all of your purchases into the business, all your sales out of the business, so that you can track your profit and loss, so that you can track your shrinkage, so you can track returns, so you can track all that stuff from a financial performance perspective, and then pull data visualizations off the back of that for managing the company. You still need something else to run the financials of the business.
Exactly. And we just use QuickBooks that integrates with Data Ninja, and that's, again, learning curve at the time, but it all works pretty seamlessly. ShipStation, Data Ninja, QuickBooks all talk to each other and are pretty seamless now.
Nice. That's one of the things that I guess I help with as a consultant. And so I do see this on a regular basis, that sometimes brands have to get burnt with a bad architecture a couple of times before they land on the one that works for their business. And sometimes they realize, oh, these out-of-the-box integrations between these systems aren't as out-of-the-box as they say they are, or at least they're not as complete as they say they are. So therefore, we now need a custom integration and maybe a custom middleware tool to sit between these systems to make them talk to each other and share data in the ways we need them to. And it is a steep learning curve when, brands like yours, they're generally not technical people, meaning that they're not a solution architect for commerce technology. They want to run their brand, they want to sell stuff, they want to have great conversations with customers, they want to make an amazing product in the first place, and the last thing they want to have to think about is the technical side. But you almost have to nowadays have someone at least a little bit technical in the business, because tech underpins your ability to do what you do at scale.
Absolutely. And it's really it's a learning curve, but there's light at the end of that tunnel. And now everybody uses it pretty seamlessly. And I will also say it's satisfying to know that all of that work that we put in to make this part of our operation has come to fruition to be successful. It would have sucked if we did all this, tried everything we could to make this work, and then we were like, now that we understand it, thought, damn, this system sucks, or we cheaped out, we should have just gone with the better one because this is not going to cut it. But it does. It did make a very tangible improvement to the efficiency and organization of our operation. And so you're going to need to implement something like this, you will need somebody to champion it. You will need somebody that really is your champion to ask all the questions and to implement everything, that can then pass down that knowledge, that is technologically savvy, that understands how the entire system works. And it's a bit of an undertaking, but I assume most businesses that have plans of scaling or being serious about manufacturing or warehouse management, it's necessary anyways. So I'm sure somebody will be capable in most businesses.
And I think you have one additional complexity in that it's not like you are just making a widget that is unregulated and you can ship off 10,000 of those widgets to a 3PL. They onboard 10,000 of this SKU into their warehouse, and then they handle everything from there for you. And if you get into, say, a 4PL, which then can also handle customer service and can handle returns and can handle all those other things, you can offload even as a manufacturer, you can offload a significant amount of that workload to third parties to where you don't necessarily have to be as tech savvy and vertically integrated as you guys. But for your industry, you have no choice. And I get that. And even some quote unquote wholesale brands, they go one step further. They work with a contract manufacturer. So they're not even manufacturing directly themselves. So they don't even need to have a manufacturing system. Then their contract manufacturer ships their products to their 3PL, which is also a contract 3PL, 4PL. So they're operating at quite an arm's length from their product and from their operations. And they are seriously dependent on a lot of third parties to make that all happen seamlessly. Whereas you guys, although yes, upfront, there's a significant amount of pain getting to the level of maturity that you're at, you now own every step of the customer journey, whether that's a wholesale customer, whether that's a retail customer, a contract manufacturing customer, or a DC customer, you own that entire CX. You own that end to end. And so there's a double-edged sword there, right? You got no one to blame because it's all on us. And if we fuck up, that's for us to fix and make right with our customer, whoever they may be. But we also can exert a tremendous amount of control and granularity over that experience as well.
Sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the grass is always greener mentality. There are times when we dream of a day where, man, what if we just didn't do all this shit and we just focused on the sales? Because with my business, there's a wide variety of issues and things that we're tackling at all times. And that's why I say on paper, a business consultant would not typically advise somebody to do both here necessarily. But since we are, it has actually, again, been a blessing in disguise in that you think, well, we're doing our own shipping and we're doing our own manufacturing and our own warehouse management. Like a lot of the brands that we make products for outsource all of that, and they just focus on e-commerce or sales, which is totally fine and probably advisable in a lot of cases. But since we do have it, it has been terrific. We save on margin. We have a more intimate understanding of how the business actually works. We're not just sitting behind the computer and doing ad spend. We really understand where there are opportunities to improve the business across the entire customer journey, like you mentioned. If you don't have that transparency, sometimes it may be hard to understand where you could save money. How do you save money on shipping? You go from this 3PL to that 3PL and incur the cost in transitioning your entire business to a new place. So that is, even though we've dreamed of simpler businesses at times, I think we've all come to the realization that we have something unique and we have unique opportunities as a result of doing the many things that we do.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but as entrepreneurs, you want to own as much of your business as you can, right? Like, I think for me, and even to this day, when like 90+% of my business comes from my content, like my content generates the credibility in the industry behind me as a brand, as a person, as an individual who's worked in the industry for a long time. It creates all the inbound inquiries. It does all that stuff. And people have told me, especially even just take this podcast, for example, I do all my own recording. I do all my own post-production. I do all my own distribution. I do my own sub-distribution. Now, people have told me, why the hell do you do that? You're the e-com guy. You're not a podcast producer. Actually, I am. And the reason why I do that, and at some point, I'm sure that I'll outsource maybe bits and pieces of the post-production process or whatever when I get to a sufficient scale where I just can't handle it anymore because I want to move to 5 episodes a week instead of 3. And I can't do that and also do consulting at the same time. There will come a day I'll have to outsource components of this. But I think, A, I'll be very selective, but B, I'll know exactly how to brief someone in what I want done and exactly how I need it done to preserve the brand equity that I've spent decades building up. And I think a lot of brands, they shortchange themselves because they want to outsource too soon. Whereas if they owned more internally, at least initially, they would then know how to effectively and efficiently outsource when it makes sense, as opposed to not having an intimate understanding of the end-to-end running of their business. And they outsource too soon. And I think they do that in the name of efficiency. They do that in the name of scalability. They do that in the name of, hey, I want to focus on this part of my business. I'm not a distributor. I'm not a warehouse. I'm not a warehouse company. I'm not a software company. So therefore, why would I want to think about all those things? My argument to that is the reason you want to think about all those things is because it's your business. It's that 3PL, for example, might work on behalf of 50 businesses. Their business isn't your business. And so
right.
I think it's not going to always work for every company to do everything in-house initially. I get that. And then they might not even get off the ground if they had to incur those costs. But I think businesses seem to, in my experience, to outsource too soon before they've learned all the lessons that they need to learn before outsourcing. What is your take on that?
That is such a great point and something that we have done so many times. Really couldn't agree with you more. I think before you outsource, so long as it's feasible, you should learn how to do that task at hand as though you weren't going to outsource it to its fullest ability, rather than, I can't do this, let's just make somebody else do it. The best case scenario is for you to figure it out as though you are doing it yourself, so that when you outsource it, one, what is considered proficient. If you work with an agency too quickly on something and they could tell you that they're doing great, and if you don't understand what great really means, then you're going to get the short end of the stick on that. And even for SEO, for example, we have a whole team that helps us with that now, but only after I've fully understood every inch of that channel, so that when they're reporting back and showing me the numbers on everything that's happening and our keyword improvements and our domain authority and all of our different increased in SERP rankings, I fully understand what is considered effective. We've done the same thing with customer service. Customer service was all in-house here. Every single inquiry, we had a person sitting right over there that did all of it. That person is still the customer service manager, but now manages only. And we have a team of people off-site that are the first wave of all customer service inquiries, but that person over there knows how the entire system works, what is common, what type of inquiries we're receiving. And it's funny because in doing so, even though we are outsourcing or removing things from our direct operation under this roof, it feels like it's still all under our watchful care in a way. And also by doing all these different things, even including fulfillment, for example, we've almost started a mini fulfillment business, even though the only customer is ourselves. Not that we would ever pursue this, but the knowledge we've gained by fulfilling orders ourselves, for example, basically gives us the knowledge to start a fulfillment business if we wanted to. That'd be a bad example, but same thing with SEO. You could do a search engine optimization agency with the knowledge that we've gained. We have tactically decided that no, we want to use this knowledge to service like our brand, but I think it's only beneficial to fully understand each and every operation when possible before delegating it, to your point.
Yeah, could not agree more. I just see big risks in not owning certain capabilities in-house, and as you say, not being able to monitor third parties effectively, or not even being able to vet third-party proposals to you. So, for example, if you wanted to outsource SEO, for example, and you got 5 proposals from 5 agencies, if you don't know anything about that, how can you compare those proposals on an apples-to-apples basis to know which one's presenting the best value or the best fit for your business, or who's going to take as much care as you would? How can you vet proposals? Of course, there are cases where a brand, for example, might bring in a consultant like myself to help them to have that internal capability, because they effectively adopt me as an internal resource because they're the ones paying me. So I become their internal ally when they're going out to agencies and they're getting proposals. There's ways in which you can bring that capability in-house without necessarily having a direct employee. But to your point, I think it's really difficult for brands to vet external resources if they've got literally zero knowledge, zero internal capability around that skill set. It becomes really difficult. And even to your point around adopting new technology, I think unless you knew your process inside and out, and unless you had gone through a lot of pain to arrive at that process and become GMP certified and going through all those hoops that you have to jump through internally, unless you had done that, you wouldn't necessarily be able to even vet a platform like Data Ninja. You wouldn't even be able to ask the questions of the vendor and say, does it do this? Does it do that? Does it manage this process? Does it own this process? Does it do batch tracking? Does it do origin tracking? Does it do these 53 things that we need to do internally as a business? And does it automate any of those functions? You wouldn't even know the questions to ask unless you had done that.
And another example of that actually is, even though we basically make everything in-house, there are certain product type. I'll just say we don't make the pet treats and the capsules and the gummies and the oils and we do 90% of them, right? So we make the extracts and source the ingredients and then ship it to somebody that may put it together in certain cases. By being a manufacturer, GMP certified, knowing how we manufacture, when the manufacturer is explaining a problem, or maybe not so much a problem, we fully understand their world. If they were to say something about lead times being increased from some packaging from China, it's okay, I get that. I know that's happening. It's Chinese New Year, whatever. Like, I know that's not BS. But sometimes we've had instances with certain manufacturing partners where we will go over there and actually help them improve their business so that they can service us better because we know everything that we're doing, including data tracking, inventory management, employee management sometimes. So it's just been a huge asset to just have that knowledge and apply it and be able to make responsible partnerships with the knowledge we've acquired.
And I'm sure those partners appreciate it too, because, for example, when I help a client, for example, source an agency partner, for example, when we put a BRD, a business requirements document, to that agency, because I'm the one that's documenting that on behalf of the business, I'm now documenting that in language that the agency can understand, so that they can put together a proper proposal based on that language that's going to have accurate estimates, accurate fixed price elements, accurate time and materials elements, so that they can go away and they can do their best work. Whereas if they got nothing from the customer and basically just had a 1-hour mini discovery up front, and then they were expected to put a proposal based on that, that's not going to set the agency up for success to do their best work. Whereas in your case, it's exactly the same. You are setting up your partners to do their best work and to deliver at a high level for you, because you're enabling them to do. You're not holding on to this internal knowledge and saying, oh, that's our unique differentiator. We don't want to help anybody else be better because they might eventually become a competitor of ours. And I see that too. I see a lot of lack of openness because people think all this effort they've gone through internally to get as good as they are, that's our unique differentiating factor.
Right.
So we're not going to help anybody else get good.
And I fundamentally disagree with that approach as well. Very strong.
Totally.
And I've had manufacturing partners also hold information tight to their chest as though I'm trying to take something from them when I could care less about anything that they think may be proprietary about their business operations or something. I think the free flowing of information is just helpful to all parties involved. And anytime that you think holding things close to your chest and not sharing with people only prevents new information from coming to you also.
Correct.
And high tide raises all ships. It's I've seen it because I've seen so many businesses circulate through by the nature of our contract manufacturing business. That philosophy never prevails when you're trying to just restrict everything. Although you have something so secretive, unless it's a literal proprietary formula of a product maybe, or a patented technology, you're not that as special as you might think you are in being unique.
I think that extends even to our conversation, right? So I've interviewed some guests who, for example, when I've asked them about their technical stack, they don't want to talk about that, right? They won't say, for example, they might not have said that they were using Data Ninja, for example, and they wouldn't say how that's improved their business because they think that's a proprietary part of our stack that has made us 25% more efficient, and we don't want competitors to tail onto that efficiency, and we want to make them do the work to figure out what technology is going to be better for them. So I appreciate your transparency. I appreciate your honesty and openness here. And my encouragement off the backside of this would be, hey, look, if you're a D2C brand out there, or you're a manufacturer out there, or whatever it is you're doing in the business world, go to conferences, help other people, share information. When I go to conferences, the most useful part of almost any conference I go to in the e-commerce world is the merchant roundtables, where there's 10 merchants at a round table. There'll be a specific topic at that round table that will be talked about. I'll be a facilitator, for example, just asking the questions to prompt discussion. And merchants learning from other merchants, 99% of the time, they will get far more value out of a conference learning from their fellow merchants than they will from the people on the stage. Even me. And look, I think I'm a damn good public speaker, and I think I'm damn good at sharing information. But honestly, merchant to merchant conversations, they will always get more out of that than me navel gazing and pontificating from a stage.
And I would say that if I had to give 5 pieces of advice on what I would give to other entrepreneurs, one of them would definitely be give without the expectation of receiving, and do not worry about it. Do not do it as though you're trying to coordinate a trade or something like that. I have just made a point of anytime I can help somebody increase sales, even giving the exact growth strategy that I have pursued myself, the value that has returned to me from that person later, it could be a year later, but they know that maybe I've helped them, and hey, I have this great opportunity to be a great fit for you guys. Here you go. Keeping that flow open is one of the best things that you can do. Keep networking, who you know, not what you know. That always maintains to be true, of course, but be open, share information with people, be kind about it, and it's going to come back to you. Competition is a word that we use in business, but I don't think people are competing with each other as much as they sometimes think that they are. Like in the CBD industry, for example, there's dozens and dozens of brands. And if me competing with the other guy that's as big as me, we're not competing against each other. We could say we're competing against the huge brands in the industry, the publicly traded companies. We are collectively competing against them, but us competing against each other in the trenches here, that's not helping anything. All you can do is help each other.
I think generosity is always a good business strategy. Kindness is always a good business strategy. Humility is always a good business strategy. Collaboration over competition are always good business strategies. And I couldn't agree with you more. I've seen better things come out of generosity, openness, sharing, caring, supporting. I've seen more good things come out of that than bad things, to the tune of 95% of the time. That is going to massively improve your business and your brand. Because I tell you, karma's a thing, right? Whatever you want to call it, whether you want to call it what goes around comes around, whatever term you want to put to it, when the chips are down, those people remember what you did for them. They remember how you supported them. They remember how generous you were. And you may be in a position at some time in your business life where you need some help, where you need some support, where you need some encouragement. And you get back what you give out into the world a lot of times. And the more generous you are, the more generous people are generally willing to be with you.
For sure. And I try to make an extra point of that too, because I think sometimes in the digital social media world, entrepreneurs can get caught up in a narrative of hyper competitive type A. You have to be an asshole and just work 30 hours a day and just never sleep, and that nobody's going to ever understand you, and you're just this different animalistic breed. And I just think that's all inflammatory, kind of. And
it's contrived too, right?
Yeah,
because it's not
exactly.
reality.
Exactly. And I don't think people like working with people that are really like that. Yeah, I agree with you. Generosity, it's a good business strategy.
Love it. Love it. Dennis, I've super enjoyed our time together. We're now coming to the point of the podcast where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you, let you ask me one question, any question you like. Can be personal, can be professional. So Dennis Mistrioty from Batch, what is your question for me today?
Oh, interesting. Okay, let's see here. Why don't I ask you, who is the most fascinating, if you can remember, who is the most fascinating person you have interviewed so far? Because I see you've done a lot of interviews. So do you have one that really stands out to you?
Look, there are a lot that stand out to me. Yeah, it's almost like saying, who's your favorite child? And I don't want to make it sound like, I don't want to make it sound like they're not all interesting in their own way.
I shouldn't say you like favorite, but maybe most unique.
No, but we'll say is the ones who have been the most open and honest are the best guests. And for example, I had Christina Harrison on here, and she is building and has been building for the last decade plus an e-commerce platform specifically for the manufacturing and distribution industry in the heavy equipment space. So tractors and graders and basically in the automotive space. And she's been working in this space for a very long time, and she's just incredibly knowledgeable. Now, the level of transparency that she was willing to give, despite the fact that some of her information could potentially benefit some of her direct competitors, like I cherish that willingness to be so honest and so open in the face of knowing that, yes, this is going to potentially help her future customers to understand her better and understand what she does better and maybe make her more attractive to future customers. But there's an equal side of that where she could easily have thought, I'm not going to be as open because this will be a threat to my business in some way. And on the flip side, and I won't name names, but there was one technology vendor, CEO and founder, that was on the podcast. And that podcast was probably the most difficult podcast I've recorded because they wouldn't share anything technical. Like 95% of my questions were technical about the platform, like what differentiated it from their competitors and what unique things do they bring to the table that make their customers more successful using their technology. And they were so closed book about how their technology worked that for me, it was a really difficult episode to record, and I almost felt like the outcome wasn't great either because the listeners didn't get like to the meat and potatoes of what they were talking about. Like it was all cloak and daggery kind of stuff. And so that's what I would say. I would say that guests like yourself who are willing to just open the kimono and share freely without fear of someone stealing their ideas, those are the ones in general that I would say are the best guests. And I've been fortunate. I would say 90+% of the guests I've had on this podcast fall into that camp where they're super transparent, super open, super honest, don't have anything to hide, willing to share warts and all, even the things that they failed at and want to do better at and are doing better at over time. I think sharing warts and all is the thing that I would say differentiates a fantastic guest from a really challenging guest to interview.
I could see that. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially in a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, because when you're in a conversation like this, the whole idea is to try to hopefully elicit something new that person maybe has never talked about before, even if they've been on 50 podcasts before. Because I'm trying to bring something new to the industry, new insights that nobody else has talked about before. And if you want to open the kimono, I can't do that. I can't have those deep and meaningful conversations.
And if you're not adding value to the listeners, then what's the point of coming on at all?
100%. Now, if people want to get a hold of you or find out more about Batch or what you do, how you do it, are they best to go to the website? Are they best to reach out to you on LinkedIn? And I will put all your links, like your profile link, into the show notes. I'll put the Batch link. So that's hellobatch.com. I'll also put that in the show notes, is your web address. So how are people best to get a hold of you if they want to have a yarn with you?
Yeah, hellobatch.com is probably the best way. Or if you want to DM us on Instagram, it's batch_by_WHS. If you reach out both through the website or Instagram and say, hey, I listened to Dennis on the podcast, would love to get in touch with them. You know, like I said, the people responding sit right next to me. So they'll just be like, hey, somebody's reaching out from the podcast. They'll just be like, yeah, send them over. So it'll be super easy.
Love it. Dennis, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute joy and a pleasure to speak with you today. Wish you every success with Batch and Beyond, and I can't wait to get you on soon and see what's happened. Maybe in another 12, 18 months, get you back on the pod and see what Batch has done in the meantime.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason. Enjoyed the conversation a lot.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.